the way that people now think about police is that they perceive less bribery taking from the police, and this is actually true. It is as a result of a different combination of factors. First of all, the police now is professionalized, meaning that back in the days, during the very difficult transition of the country, unfortunately, some people who didn't have the actual education or the background became police officers. They wore the uniform and started to offer security to the people. They were loyalists to a certain government, and this, of course, corrupts the system, because then they can use the flag of a certain government or the party as a protection, and meanwhile they don't have the actual minimal knowledge on how to offer security to the citizens, let alone recognizing the law. So this has changed dramatically time after time, because now everybody that adheres to the police force should go through the academy, the police academy. They make a lot of tests. There is also there are some tests being done on the polygraph on certain positions. And also there is a very tough check and balance mechanism in place, meaning that if police doesn't perform, we have an agency called the Agency of the Police Oversight, which actually checks into the work and the quality of the work of the police.
Since 2013, you've gone in and I think it's fair to say, completely disrupted this system, this old guard, as we would say in English.
That's the word, disruption.
Yeah, you've disrupted, and I mean that in a positive way, this old guard, this old system, this old mentality. You've introduced structures and systems and standards which draw on the United Kingdom, for example, and other best practices. It's not like you've just made it up. And while I think everyone can say there's room for improvement, there always is, things have changed. But I'm wondering, how tough was that to go into an institution, a network of people, mainly guys of a certain age who are a bit I think we can say some of them were a bit macho. And to go and change the whole system of doing things from the inside out, that's got to be quite tough. Did you receive pushback? Was it hard, to undertake these kind of reforms? I mean, on a personal level with people.
Well, listen, this is, this was the determination of the government to exactly disrupt this way, just like there was a disruption on the justice system with the justice reform, just as it was a disruption on the territorial reform by creating that huge reform into assembling 383 local units into 61. That was a huge reform. But it's the only way that you can do that, because otherwise, through gradual change, nothing would be possible. And this was the advice that we got also from international partners. That is, if we want to introduce a new reform, you should look at it with new eyes and be brave enough to introduce that. I don't know if you remember the vetting in the police force, which was very radical. Reform introduced in which every police officer would go through a vetting system on 3 pillars. They should justify their wealth, they should justify their course of work, whether they are effective or not, and their knowledge and their integrity. So this created a really great upheaval into the organization, but let's say make it as a kind of comparison as an antibiotic. When you introduce a certain antibiotic to an organism, of course, that those who are the most vulnerable will try to be shaken and to get out of the system.
The ones who protest the most are the ones who...
Well, of course, because otherwise, if you are a honest police officer that offers, that's the opposite. You want this reform to happen so that the meritocracy tries to be part of the police organization. So there was a lot of resistance, but I think that it was worthy to do that kind of reform. Of course, that the reform is ongoing now.
And what are the biggest challenges you have? What are the main issues, pain points that you wish you could solve immediately within the police force, within Albanian society? What do you think are the most pressing things that need to be fixed?
Well, I think that the road traffic is one of the main challenges that needs to be fixed. And of course, with the introduction of technology, this is something that it's giving its results, but still there is a lot of work to be done. Even though from the statistics, there is a dramatic decrease on the victims of the traffic accidents. Of course, that every victim is a tragedy. I'm not saying that people are statistics, not at all. But it's important that we try to decrease that even further. The other challenge, I think, that we are very much focused now has to do with community safety on the gender-based violence and protection of minors. So, of course, that the cases have been reported more and more each year, meaning that there is a lot of more trust to the police. But this is a work that cannot be let only in the good hands of women police officers. This requires social workers, and this requires all the other agencies to deal with that. So I think that this is one of the main chunks of work that needs to be standardized even further. And I think that when it comes to the school safety, we have a lot to do. But with the smart cities on one hand, and with a project on having cameras inside the classrooms, on the other hand, this is, of course, one of the topics. And last but not least, quite the opposite, which is the first, has to do with cybercrime.
Yes.
And with the cyberbullying, which is an issue that we don't talk too much in the country. And I believe that we need to start a really very serious national debate on how we behave online and what kind of measures we do need to have in place without disrupting the freedom of speech, but of course by disrupting the, let's say, the bullying and everything that happens in the online realm.
Yeah, domestic violence is one, and the behavior in the online sector is another, because, I mean, as a mum, I'm terrified. I mean, my daughter doesn't have any access and won't to social media and things, but, you know, when she gets older, it's scary because you see what goes on online. And, you know, I have friends, colleagues who've been stalked, harassed, everything, you know, and it's terrifying. It's a whole new world that exists just online, but unfortunately does spill over into real life. Now, I have to be careful of the time, but my last question, I heard that you are going to be introducing some kind of voluntary policing system. Was that correct?
Oh, it's, well, this was a decision taken back in 2019, actually. And it was after the earthquake, the big earthquake that was devastating for Albania. Back in the days, the idea was that we didn't have any kind of voluntary people on the ground to go and knock in the doors of the elderly who were alone at their houses, or people who needed help. So it was a kind of voluntary, like it exists in the European countries, in which parents, for example, take a responsibility that a day in the week accompany the kids to go to the school, or some voluntary people on the ground regarding neighborhood watches.
Yes.
So it doesn't need, I have heard the debates and I've heard the criticism. It was nothing like observing the society, not at all. This was just people who can actually offer safety to the community, much more on firefighting and on a civil emergency element, rather than on the public order and security. So this, I want to clarify.
I think they reacted badly because of the past. You know, that during communism, there were people who spied the whole neighborhood and things like that. But actually, this concept is so common in the UK,
Absolutely.
for example. You know, you have dedicated people in your apartment block, on your street, community groups, like neighborhood watch, voluntary police officers, or like, I can't remember what we called them, but yeah, they're not proper police, but they work with the police in the community and things, you know, so it's a tried and tested.
I mean, we have administrators of our neighborhoods.
Yes.
So every group of buildings has one administrator who takes care of, you know, all these nitty-gritty elements of the neighborhood, the flowers and the street and the lights and, you know, the water supply and everything else. So we didn't have a person to take care when something happens, when there is a big fire,